So this book that the conference is based on today is this one that Matt and I wrote. I'm a northerner from Manchester, and I believe that people from the north have got lots of really worthwhile things to say. So I ended up writing a book with a southerner that supports the wrong football team. However, it wasn't a very painful experience. It was a bit painful, but it wasn't a very painful experience. And what we've produced, I think, is a really good challenge to the way that preaching has been happening for the last maybe 50 or so years, really, since people started thinking there was a congregation out there. And you may remember Fred Prodigal, people started to say the congregation doesn't necessarily hear what you say because the congregation has personalities and circumstances and contexts. I'm just going to plug 2 more books to save me the bother later on. I started writing about preaching women because women's experience of life is different from men's experience of life. It just is. We can have that debate later on. And then the other one, Out of the Shadows, which is about women in the Bible and looking at them from different perspectives. But let me get back to where I'm meant to be. Present to myself, whatever happens when you're preaching, the first thing that happens is people see you. And unless you are a white man, they'll see a woman preacher, a disabled preacher, or a black preacher. But they won't just see a preacher unless you're a white man. So you are in your sermon already, whether you think you are or not. You're there when you sit down to read the text. You're reading it that day, with those circumstances, with your life stage, whatever you're at, you are in the sermon and you are seen in it. And I've been doing some research recently on women preachers and their experience of learning to preach, and the things that have been said to them or written to them as they develop as preachers. Mainly these were ordinands, curates, or trainee readers. If you're not Anglican, a trainee reader is a trainee lay minister. And the first thing that these women reported is comments about what they wear. And so somebody was told that the hair was too long, someone else was told the hair was too short, someone was told that the skirt was too long, someone was told that the skirt was too short. And my personal favourite is you've got to stop wearing coloured clothing now that you're ordained because you've got to look serious. By which one is serious, you've got to look boring. And ministerial supervisors, some classic comments, including, let me rewrite your sermon for you. And that process meant getting rid of all the stories about women and about women's lives in that sermon. And these things are happening to many women preachers. So I started off thinking, well, what's it like to be a woman preacher? But it's the same for men. Men preachers are also seen as who they are, and they're there in their sermons. So the real question is, how will you be in it? There's a lovely story, an unconscious response to being in the sermon from a minister called Claire. And she was preaching on Job, hence the story of Job and Claire. And when we read this sermon, it was absolutely fantastic. It was moving. She got into the pain of Job. She understood the tragedy, all those things. It was a brilliant piece of writing. But when she delivered the sermon, she did it with a big smile on her face. All the time. And why was that? Because when the lecturer worked with her, they discovered that as a little girl, she'd always been taught, oh, isn't she lovely? She smiles. And smiling was how she gained approval as a child. So therefore, as a preacher, what she did was smile, despite the fact that it was completely out of context and inappropriate. Some of our responses to being seen in the sermon are rather like politicians or celebrities. Well, let's not talk about politicians today, actually. Rather like celebrities. We develop an image of ourselves that we want others to see, and increasingly the person that we want to see ourselves as. So that might mean we want to be a confident preacher. I want to be the preacher who's erudite and understands this text. I want to be the preacher who comforts people. I can't have people leaving church upset on a Sunday morning, can you? Despite the fact that the Bible has quite a few things to say about honesty, integrity, climate change, and all those things. So my argument is, first of all, when we come to prepare a sermon, we need to consciously think, who am I? What's affecting the way that I'm reading this text today? And there will be lots of things that might happen. At the moment, I've got a bad back that affects mine, because if there's anything about pain, I go, oh, I know about that. Not really. And what do I believe about this thing? What do I already believe about it? That might not be what do I consciously believe. It might be what I always thought this passage means. One of the easy examples, and this came up in my research actually. One of my respondents in my research had this lovely phrase about whenever we hear preaching about David and Bathsheba, A, it's always about David, and B, it's always about Bathsheba. It's the temptress. And she said, that's highly unlikely. Actually, David was probably a peeping Tom, but we wouldn't want to say that, would we? Which I thought was brilliant, usable data for my doctorate. Right. And what do I assume about this passage, and what does it really say on the page? And what are the silent zones in my preaching? What will I not say? What will you never hear me talking about? And that's a really good question for all of us to think about. And I think it was Lewis Hamilton when he first started racing, which is a long time ago now, said the way to win is imagine yourself winning. And one of my favourite ways of preparing a sermon is, can I honestly imagine myself saying that? Because if I can't imagine myself saying it, I'm not going to say it with any integrity at all. So don't say it, leave it to somebody else. One of my tutors at college used to say, we're called to preach the whole counsel of God, but not just you, and not all at once. Which is a really wise message. In the book, I say, I remember when I realised I was white, and this is the moment. This is a spice market just outside Mombasa in Kenya. And my husband and I had gone to visit it, and it looked amazing, all the colours. And we took a photograph, and as soon as we took the photograph, all my hands reached out for money. And we realised we don't belong here, this is not our place, and we're treating it as though these people are objects for our enjoyment. And I realised that I was white. And that matters when you come to read scripture. Anthony Reddy, who probably read some of his work, Black Theologian, was doing some work at Chester Cathedral a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, the problem on Maundy Thursday is we read the story of Jesus standing before Pilate as though we're with Jesus. Like you white people say. Actually, you're not. You're with Pilate. And that really hit me because it's true. And so next time I preach during Holy Week or Easter, that will be in my mind in a way it wasn't before. This is the next moment I realised that I was white. This is blocked up now, but this is where, and the black woman, the Penguin woman was telling me, this is where the Brits used to load black people on board boats as slaves to send them across to America. And that really hit me that I am part of the people who oppress other people. And that's how I got to read the Bible, because the Bible is always, in my mind, on the side of the oppressed, not the oppressed. But why preach as yourself? Have you read about any Barbara Brown Taylor books? Yeah. I went to hear Barbara Brown Taylor talk in Edinburgh, and she was talking about a similar thing to me, and somebody said to her, I was always told I shouldn't be in my sermon. She did this thing I've just done. And the guy said, but you know, I read all these commentaries and da 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 da. And she said, yeah, but that's not you, is it? And when people read commentaries, they could have stayed at home in bed or in the bath and read the same commentary, really. Which is true, isn't it? Why do people come to church? People come to church because they want to hear the gospel. They want to hear the message from a real person, a real flesh and blood person. So speaking as ourselves, it avoids giving that impression that we know everything. That's a really bad impression to give. So we need to avoid focusing on expertise. Because hopefully, if you do the lectionary, you'll know same passages come around once every 3 years, don't they? But hopefully, as a preacher, the next time it comes around, you'll be saying something different from what you said the last time you preached it, because your life with God will have moved on as well. Anyone who's one of my students or who has been knows that I hate it when sermons say, we all do this, don't we? Because do you know what? We don't. And if I speak as myself in my sermon, it stops me essentializing my experience and assuming other people experience life in the same way. All I can say is, it seems to me, or in my experience, and that helps to protect our integrity, because we're not making big claims anymore. We're just saying, it seems to me, this is my walk with God, this is what I've heard. And it allows God to speak through human personality, the human personality that God made. I've spoken to various Hebrew scholars, and I would love Psalm 139 to say that I am constantly being made, but it doesn't. Apparently the Hebrews are messing, it can mean all sorts of things. But I think that's what's behind it. I think we're constantly being made, because God changes our personality as we realise new things about ourselves. And God doesn't make your personality so that he can then totally ignore it, or she can totally ignore it when you preach. God made your personality so that God can use your personality to speak to the people in your congregation who belong to that kind of personality. Shakespeare. Thus I play in one person, many people, and none content. That's kind of like being a preacher. There's loads of people inside us as preachers. And so, according to Jungian psychology, we wear a mask. We put a mask on. And children, as I said earlier about this student called Claire, children learn which mask to wear, which mask will get them approval. And so do preachers. So in every vestry closet, there is a cupboard full of masks that you choose when you put your robes on, or you put your suit on, or your collar on, or whatever you do. You can choose a mask. Who am I going to be today? The confident preacher, the sparkly preacher? What sort of preacher will I be? And the problem with masks, of course, is the longer you wear a mask, the more it eats into your face and you forget who you really are. So here are some masks that Matt and I spent ages talking about and having fun inventing masks. Some preachers like a pantomime mask. They want to protect the congregation. How many times have you thought, I can't say that because it will upset the congregation? So we want to keep the congregation happy. And that means avoiding difficult questions. And I'm fairly convinced that our congregations don't really want us to avoid difficult questions. I'm fairly convinced that actually congregations want to know, so what are you going to say about that then? And so a stock phrase might be the equivalent of, don't worry, God's in charge. Actually, if you're not worried about climate change, it's just a bit daft, really. And God might be in charge, but God's also said, come and work with me. Not just to the preachers, but to the congregation as well. And so we need to say that to the congregation. This is the one I like, the gangster mask. This is when we get committed to particular interests, where power resides in the ability to shut down discussion and enforce consent. There's a beautiful piece of research done by a woman called Anna Strahern, which was done in a church I won't name because she doesn't. And she first of all went around the church leaders and asked what that church believed on a particular issue. And all the church leaders gave her the same answer. And then she went to members of the congregation and asked what that church believed. And very little of it overlapped with what the leaders said that church believed. And yet you might hear comments like, in this church we do this, we do that, we do that. And I think we need to be aware of saying that kind of thing in a hidden way when we preach, because we can make assumptions, can't we, that are judgmental whether we realise it or not. I was on Wednesday at Chester Cathedral, and the speaker made a bit of a play of saying that this woman who'd come up with something that was actually really good and very, very spiritual and challenging was a single mum with 2 unruly kids. So it kind of pulled the rug up from underneath this woman who'd said something really wise by devaluing her position in relation to the values of the church, as that speaker assumed. That makes sense. Okay, the beautician's mask. Where we willfully ignore the difficult Bible stories, challenging theologies, and of church history, pretend it didn't happen. So we love, and I've heard loads of people say that John Newton became a Christian, stopped selling black bodies across the Atlantic, and then wrote Amazing Grace. That's not true. He wrote Amazing Grace while he was still selling black bodies. But that story is really difficult to unpack, isn't it? Because how can we understand the grace of God while we treat other people in that kind of a way? And there are similar stories. There was a woman joined one of our home groups years and years ago now, and she bought a Bible herself, which she never had before, and she started reading it. And she read about Jephthah's daughter. And then she said, so what are you going to do about that then? And the home group leader, I didn't even know that was in the Bible. Because I so sometimes we need to say, look, this is really difficult, and read around the edges of stories rather than talk rather than pretend that they don't exist. And then this is the very new one, of course. We're very familiar with this now. The virus mask. Sometimes we need a virus mask because it might stop the spread of banality, propaganda. The risk in the church, and I think it's probably true, the reason why the church is still not properly engaged with society is we've got into a position where the bland lead the bland. And that's got to change. So as ourselves, if something's difficult or if something's hard, or let's pick up the Bible first, let's pick ourselves up first and think what's really behind this and protect our congregation from that problem. I mean, I often say, I'll probably get in trouble with my colleagues, I'm not really mad keen when I'm teaching New Testament, which I do every now and again, on doing what we call commentary work. Because commentaries are basically written by white middle class men of a certain age. There are very few commentaries written by black women, by women from different races. There are some from the two-thirds world, the global majority. Very few by women who experience life on the breadline. Very few by anyone who experiences life on the breadline, actually. And so I'd rather people engage with the Bible for themselves and check out whether they might be right rather than go straight to commentary. And then this one, this is my, I should have said this later on, I've already said it. Commentaries might be useful because they might complement what we want to say. But sometimes they're just completely off the wall and unrelated. For real communication to take place, we've got to get rid of the mask, get rid of the pretense, be who we are, so that our conversation partners can really see us and our relationship with God. Because it's not our job to make the gospel beautiful. It's our job to hold it up so that people can see it how it is beautiful. And if it's beautiful in our lives, that's what people will say. Okay. Where's Mickey? Where's the Yeah. Okay, let's have some conversation about that.